Brad, and would like to welcome everyone tonight. So happy you could all join us. I know Susan loves to be here talking with you all about nutrition and everything that she knows to share her knowledge. Tonight's session will be on critical nutrients every child needs. My name is Beth Thorpe, and I'm the executive director of the Mitchell Thorpe Foundation. And our mission is to help support families whose children are suffering from cancer, rare diseases, and other critical medical conditions. And we do this by helping them, not only financially, emotionally, but with resource support as well. And so, speaking of resources, that's why Susan has collaborated with us, and we love the collaboration to work together to bring knowledge to all of you. So, on that note, I am going to turn it over to Susan, and I know she loves to see people's faces. So, if you're willing to turn your cameras on, would be great.
I mean, I love seeing Beth's face, but I don't like looking at myself when I talk. So I'd love to see you if listen, you can show up as you are. I work with a lot of pediatric cancer families and we do a lot of Zoom calls. And I always tell them, like, listen, you can be sitting in your bed, like half awake and show up. And so, Jackie, you're always great. You always show your face. I love seeing your face. So yeah, don't hesitate. And it also, I think one of the things that Beth and Brad have done is help establish and build community. And one of the ways that we do that is even just seeing familiar faces or new faces and knowing you're not alone in this journey. So we'd love to see your face at some point. Um, but yes, I'm Season and so thankful to connect with Brad and Beth this year, actually. And I have a background as a functional nutritional therapist. Hi, Leanne. Great to see you. So I've been in practice working with, well, just everybody in their health. Hi, Catherine. But mostly pediatrics. That's really my specialty, and actually pediatric cancer. So I've been doing this for about 13 years now, and I got into it because my son, Kicker, was diagnosed with cancer right before his third birthday. It was December 4th of 2013. And that just sent us, as many of you've experienced or know, when you have a diagnosis like that for a loved one or yourself. But it really gave me the opportunity to research and study and learn even more. And so here we are now. My son is incredibly healthy. He was actually just here in my office, headed to youth group. He surfs about 6 hours a day. He does jujitsu. He's buffer than most grown men. He picks me up and literally throws me on the bed, like literally can lift I mean, I'm not big. I'm 5'1.5". But he's a beast. And I really believe that one of the reasons outside of just God's grace and provision and wanting to use our story to help others, but one of the reasons he really thrived through his cancer diagnosis and continues to today is because of the food we fed him and continue to feed him today. So I'm going to share that with you. I want to share with you just specifically nutrients. And while, you know, what I'm going to share is not just appropriate for children, it's appropriate for all of us. This is really how my family eats on a regular basis. But I do think it's important to note that when we think of nutrition and cancer, there's a lot of different opinions out there. And there's also a lot of evidence out there that can kind of show how certain ways of eating is better than others. And so, what I want to challenge you with as I share this information is just working with a practitioner as you're navigating as you're navigating a diagnosis is really important because while the information I'm going to share is going to be beneficial for everyone, tailoring your specific or your child's specific nutrition needs, when I work with a client, I tailor it to their lab work. That's really important to watch, right? So I say that there's not a one size fits all, but there are specific nutrients that almost every single person on planet Earth needs. And these are critical for children that are facing a diagnosis and disease. So that's what we're going to talk about. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will take some time to answer questions at the end. We don't want to miss any questions. So, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll have a thought and then I don't know, I just turned 44 last week. So some things just don't live as long in my brain. So if you're like me, type your questions in so you don't forget about them, okay? So what we're going to talk about tonight is really helping you get a foundational understanding of why more and more people are getting diagnosed with cancer and really the role that food plays. And when I say cancer, remember that's my specialty. But I want you to understand cancer is a symptom. Cancer isn't the problem. So I say that because you could replace cancer with disease. So this can be appropriate for anybody fighting a chronic or acute disease or diagnosis. And so we're going to talk about the specific macronutrients. There's three important ones: what they do, how they work, and what it should look like for your child. Five additional cancer-fighting foods that we really believe should be incorporated daily. And then I'm going to give you a simple action plan and an example of what you can eat in a day. So as a reminder, this information is for educational purposes only. You must consult with your physician regarding starting or stopping any medication. This is not a substitution for the professional care of your physician. However, they know nothing about nutrition, so we will just carry on. Okay. So the problem, as we've seen the food industry change. If you asked your great grandfather what they ate, they would say meat and potatoes, right? And we've seen this evolve so much, and we've seen an increased consumption of grains and sugar, which are new foods, by the way. And now we're seeing cancer become an issue with younger and younger populations. And I want you to think about our children. Like all the marketing of colorful foods, and when I mean colorful, I'm talking about like cereals and candies, it's marketed to kids. So this has really affected our children, and we've seen a decline in children's health, and we've seen a rise in obesity, a rise in cancer in kids. Between 1973 and 1991, the diagnosis of brain cancer and soft tissue sarcoma has increased more than 25% among US children. You guys, that was before there was even like some treatment for these types of cancers. So I was looking at statistics last night to give you an updated one, and there's a lot of conflicting information, but we know that cancer is rapidly increasing in our younger population. And we're not getting cancer because we're living longer. We're getting cancer because we're damaging our mitochondria on a daily basis with not just exposure to toxins, but really what we're putting in our body. And most of us are not eating the foods that keep cancer at bay, right? Or we are not eating the foods. And so what I want you to think about and what we'll talk about is there are foods that will fight cancer and there's foods that will feed cancer. So we're not eating the right foods to fight cancer. We're in fact eating foods that are feeding disease. And you know, the quote is too many cookies and too little kale. I'm not a real big fan of kale, if that makes you feel better, but it's just a funny saying that I used to tell when I was doing presentations. Um, so a couple of things to think about. These are really startling statistics. The average child under the age of 12 consumes 49 pounds of sugar per year. This is according to the CDC as of 2024. The average child under age 12 consumes 49 pounds of sugar per year. Now that's the average child. My children are not consuming anywhere near that. So that means there's kids that are consuming more than that. That's really alarming. Our Paleolithic ancestors would have had to eat 8.5 feet of sugar cane to equal the same amount of sugar that's now contained in a 34-ounce soda. Sometimes it's helpful to have a visual, right? And we're coming up in the holidays. We just, entered flu season as of November 1st, which is coincidentally after a holiday that I absolutely despise, that we gorge, especially kids gorge on candy, right? And then the official start of cold and flu season is the day after. And listen, there's no shame or guilt. That is not the purpose of this conversation. It's actually education and empowerment, because until you know better, you can't do better. But when you know better, you have an obligation to do better for your kids and your grandkids. So a typical American child eats more sugar in one day than most of our ancestors could even consume in 2 years. And cancer cells really like that. So this is the government's food pyramid. And unless you want to look like it, I would highly advise not following it. And I work really closely with, like I shared some, with clients, kids with cancer. And in working with me, I'm often in collaboration and communication with their oncology team. I had a conversation last week with the registered dietitian, pediatric oncology registered dietitian, and it was horrific because I was educating her on the reason we were making, I created a homemade custom formula for one of my kids. He's 2.5, a really aggressive brain cancer, and he's NG tube fed. And so we've created a custom formula, and this particular dietitian didn't understand why that was necessary and why he shouldn't just be on Ensure, Pediasure. And I want you to understand that these people have the best interest for your kids. They do. She's not a mean, horrible, evil person. She's just misinformed. And she's taught by the government's food pyramid, which is controlled by big pharma and big food. So it's truly a lack of education on their part. This is what I call the Thrive formula food pyramid. And this might surprise some of you because you see quite a bit of animal products at the bottom and then a little bit of fruits and veggies at the top. And here's where you need to understand that there's no one size fits all approach. But I've used this image for the last decade because it more appropriately reflects the way our growing children who are fighting a disease need to eat. Now, some kids can't tolerate dairy, right? We need to remove dairy from quite a few cancer situations for different reasons. Some kids can do it. My son drank at least a quart of kefir, a quart of raw kefir every week while he went through treatment, and it was incredibly healing for his microbiome and his immune system. But some kids can't tolerate that. So understand that this isn't the like every child needs to eat exactly like this, but this gives you an idea. So remember, the right food is cancer's fiercest enemy, and the wrong food is cancer's most powerful ally. So I want you to just really quickly pop in the comments. Have you been told, or just tell me, what have you been told? Put it in the chat about the foods that your child should eat or you should eat when you're navigating a diagnosis. What have you been told by your team, by your oncology team or your medical team? And as you share that, I need you to understand again that they have your child's best interest in mind. They just only know what they know. And doctors, pediatric oncologists are no longer required to go through nutrition at all. They used to be required to have it as an elective as a 7-hour training during the entire course of their schooling and their residency. And now it's not even required. That's really, really bad. So yeah, exactly, Jackie. Whatever he wants, let him have whatever he wants. Or Leanne, as long as they don't lose weight. Yep, same things that we were told. And while weight loss is important to manage, I always tell people your child or you are going to lose weight when you're navigating a diagnosis, and that's normal. We look at labs regularly to monitor things like cachexia or um, ketoacidosis. But this is just a lack of education and our medical systems part. So I want you to meet a gentleman by the name of Dr. Weston Price. He was a dentist, as you can see by the initials DDS, and he actually traveled around the world. He was so distraught at what he was seeing in America and in these developing countries. He was so distraught to see the decay of people's teeth. And he made the connection through his studies that the health of the mouth is reflective of the health of the entire body. So he decided to travel around and kind of figure out what is causing this. And what he found was incredibly enlightening. He found that in the areas that were not introduced to the industrial agricultural revolution, meaning processed and packaged foods, these people had incredibly wide, beautiful faces, wide smiles, all their teeth fit, and their teeth were super healthy, and so was their body. And he saw a very low incidence of disease in this population. And then what he saw was agriculturally influenced areas were some of the unhealthiest people he saw. Their teeth were rotting, their facial structure was narrow, and you see this in kids. I'm like always studying people. I can't help it and diagnosing them while I'm watching them. Just kidding. I don't do that. Okay, maybe sometimes I do. But when I'm like at the airport and I'm just watching people, and you're just seeing kids with skinnier and skinnier faces. That's not how we were supposed to be. We were supposed to have enough room for all of our teeth, and a wide, round face is a sign of health in a lot of cases and cultures. So what he found was the foods that people were eating in these uninfluenced by agriculture, so kind of these underdeveloped areas where there were tribes eating off the land, the foods they were eating were traditional foods. They were eating egg yolks and butter and liver and organ meats from these healthy animals that they were raising. And when you think about some of these traditional foods, you look at, oh my gosh, I can get almost all the fat soluble vitamins and choline and DHA and zinc, some of these essential nutrients from just a small group of food. So vitamin A is essential for health. You get vitamin A from butter, egg yolks, and liver. Vitamin D, butter, and egg yolks. Vitamin K2, it's really anti-cancer, has a lot of benefits for health. You get it from butter, egg yolks, and organ meats. Choline, I pull a report, it's called a nutrigenomic report on a lot of my cancer kids. And this report shows me how their genetic predisposition. So I'm able to see just all their genetics, all their genetic SNPs. And you've probably heard of something called MTHFR, which is a genetic mutation that means that they're not properly detoxing. We see that almost every child that has cancer has that genetic SNP in common. And so we can change that, by the way, with nutrition. We can change the expression of genes, which is so cool. And I won't get into that. That will be here for 2 hours. But choline is another point that I notice on a lot of these genetic reports that a lot of these kids have a predisposition to needing more choline. And so I'm always introducing or including choline in their food plans, and you can get choline. Egg yolks, liver, and wild seafood are great sources. And then, like you saw, DHA, zinc, cholesterol, these are all necessary for health, for immune system function, and for life. And you're getting them from very simple, not processed foods. Now, don't worry. I don't expect your children to gnaw on liver. That's not realistic. There are now, thankfully, development of supplements that are literally freeze-dried organ meats in a capsule that either you can swallow if your child can swallow a pill, or you can break it open and mix it in their ground beef and they will never know that it's there. So that's a, no, a whole nother conversation, and I teach this all the time, how to get your picky kids to eat. That would be a good topic we can do next year, is teaching picky kids how to introduce these foods into their diet. So we want to get back to the basics, right? We want to talk about what are the macronutrients that we need. These are nutrients that we need in large amounts. So macro meaning larger. We need to make sure our kids are getting these on a regular basis. So number one is fat. And believe it or not, saturated fats. So before you freak out and think your cholesterol levels are going to go through the roof, when I was working with clients that didn't have cancer, and they would come to me, this is, years ago, they would come to me with high cholesterol levels, high blood pressure. I would put them on a diet that was very high in healthy saturated fats, and we would see all their levels normalize. And I'd get calls from their cardiologists and from doctors that were like, "What are you doing? And how is this happening? They told me they're eating butter and steak, and I don't believe them." It's a whole other conversation, but cholesterol-rich foods help bring cholesterol levels down. It's grains and sugar and processed foods that increase the levels of cholesterol, because cholesterol increase is a direct result of inflammation. So what's anti-inflammatory? Omega-3 fats, butter, grass-fed steak, wild seafood. That's the antidote to inflammation. What's high in inflammation is omega-6, which is grains and sugars. So healthy saturated fats are essential. You're getting that from butter, coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil. I just got back from Greece. I took my daughter last week. We went on a 10-day trip with our church, which was so cool. And we experienced the best olive oil in the nation. And I just want to, or in the world, not the nation. And I want to make a quick note about olive oil. Always buy your olive oil in a glass jar that is dark, and it should be cloudy and kind of green. It should also coagulate in the fridge. If it doesn't, it's been processed and it's not, there won't be as many healthy benefits. So, what are the roles of fats? Fats provide a source of energy. They're actually essential for life, for energy. They starve cancer cells. So many of you have heard studies about the ketogenic diet and seeing tumor reduction, and we see that all the time. It's the building blocks of cell membranes. It's the preferred source of energy for the heart. Yes, saturated fat is the preferred source of energy for the heart. Fat is required for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. Sometimes people have really low vitamin D levels and they keep supplementing and they don't know why it's not going up. Well, we have to increase their fat to make sure they're actually having the ability to absorb the supplement they're taking. Fat makes sex hormones. So butter makes babies is really, it's really what it comes down to. If you want to have a baby, you need to eat more butter. But truly, the fat has everything to do. It's kind of the building block of our sex hormones. So that could be your libido, that could be fertility. That can also be just balancing estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. What's really interesting about fat is when we talk about cancer, you need to understand that normal cells, meaning healthy cells have the metabolic flexibility to use both glucose, which is sugar, and ketones, which is fat, as fuel. So a healthy cell can go, you know what, I'm going to use some glucose, I'm going to use some fat. And they're going to choose what they want to use as fuel. Cancer cells, not all, most cancer cells lack this ability. They can only use glucose as fuel. They can't use ketone bodies, fat, as fuel. And so imagine you reduce your glucose intake, you can effectively starve many different cancers. This is really, really important to grasp. So this really was made kind of public knowledge by Dr. Otto Warburg, who won the Nobel Prize for his discovery that cancer cells have a completely different energy metabolism than healthy cells do. So this is why you won't ever hear me talking about doing a vegan high juice diet for people with cancer, because it completely goes against Dr. Warburg's findings and really understanding the energy mechanism of a cell. Is juicing bad? Nope. Is being a vegan bad? Nope. But if you are doing both of those things, or your child, which most kids won't, walking through cancer, it could be problematic if you're not very carefully watching your ketones. So again, this is a really powerful thing to dig into if you're interested. Dr. Otto Warburg, you can research his work, but it's just important to understand that all cancer cells have the ability to reprogram their energy metabolism. They can literally reprogram themselves. Cancer's smart. It can reprogram itself to only be able to consume glucose and be able to grow. Just like parasites, they don't want to die. They want to keep growing and proliferating, and they know how to reprogram themselves to use glucose. So again, if we can starve the glucose from the body, and by the way, you can get glucose in animal foods. So a lot of people say, oh my gosh, these people going on a carnivore diet, they won't have any, glucose or fiber. You can get that from protein, to the point where I tell people on a carnivore diet, you need to also watch your glucose because excess protein can turn into glucose. I only share that because people get worried when they think of like pulling, glucose out of their diet. That means fruits and veggies. And with kids, we're generally not really pulling all of that out of their diet, but we're probably limiting fruit if we want to make sure we're managing their cancer diagnosis. So how much fat? This is just an example. 75% of calories consumed in a day should really come from a healthy source of fat while fighting cancer. So a 50-pound growing child that consumes 2,000 calories a day, if you're my son, it's more like 5,000. I can't even keep up with him. Approximately 1,500 calories or 165 grams should come from fat. And so I gave you an example here. You can screenshot this to see like exactly what that means and how that translates in grams. And it's really easy to do this when you're giving your kids smoothies, because you can sneak olive oil in, coconut oil in, macadamia nut butter, even butter. You can put avocados in smoothies and they don't taste, they just actually make a smoothie creamy. You can put, egg yolks in from a really, if you're very comfortable and familiar with your source of eggs, if it's from somewhere you trust. But there's easy ways to get this amount of fat in. So these are my favorite fats. Again, we've already talked about most of them, but just remember, the saying you take away today is butter makes everything better, and butter makes babies. Protein. So this is the second macronutrient. And so I want you to think of protein like grass-fed beef, organic pastured poultry, organic lamb, pastured eggs, low toxicity wild seafood. The roles of protein, super important. I think it's really important to understand, like we're again just in Greece, and so understanding the Greek root word of a lot of words is really powerful. But the word protein is actually derived from the Greek word proton, which means prime importance. So this is really essential. Every protein is made of a selection of 20 individual acids that are chained together in a particular sequence. Like this is where I go, how do you not believe in a God that created us with such intentional detail? Like when you start to understand DNA and protein sequences and all of this, you're just like, wow, it blows my mind. So some of those amino acids are essential, which means the body requires them because it can't make them. Some are non-essential. The body can make it, so you're not required to take it in. I'm going to share with you what those look like because it's important during a cancer diagnosis to make sure you're supplementing. Um, so with these proteins, I want you to think of the 9 essential amino acids. They're complete proteins, okay? And so they have everything you need. You've probably heard of like protein powders, and they say it's a complete protein. I would prefer you to eat real protein coming from an animal over a protein powder if possible. We'll use protein powders if we need to, but the body doesn't break it down the same way. And so usable protein from a healthy animal is superior. So I'll break this down a little bit. But the role of protein, they're enzymes. Enzymes are proteins. Antibodies, which is necessary to fight infection, protein. Hemoglobin, protein. Hormones, proteins. A lot of people don't make those connections, right? And so we know a lot of these names from regular blood work when our child's going through treatment for disease. So antibodies are proteins that help fight infection. Zinc is a really great way to improve antibodies. It's very high in protein-rich foods like turkey and oysters. Now, your kids might not love oysters. My kids do. I ruined them. I mean, we now have the most expensive children on the planet because we ruined them at a young age of introducing them to all the really expensive healthy foods. But turkey is a really great source of zinc and a great source of protein. And we're about to enjoy turkey if you celebrate Thanksgiving. Hemoglobin is a protein that's found in the red blood cells. This is important for carrying oxygen, and this is why we have to sometimes give transfusions when hemoglobin levels get low. But folate, which we'll talk about a little bit later too, is a type of B vitamin that plays an essential role in hemoglobin production. So a lot of kids that have an MTHFR mutation tend to have low hemoglobin regularly. So we can help change that by introducing folate-rich foods, which I'll introduce you to in a moment. But organic spinach and beef liver are really good sources. And again, you can hide these in almost everything. You chop up spinach really small and you mix it in their burger patty or you mix it in their taco bowl. You're cooking the spinach with the meat. They won't even notice. I don't love raw spinach, by the way. I like cooked spinach for nutrient reasons. But you can also mix spinach into muffins. Again, you're chopping it up really small. They don't even realize. And so there's really tricky ways to get these foods in your kids. The ideal amount of daily protein, 20% of calories consumed in a day should come from healthy animal protein. And so again, when we use a growing 50-pound child, they're consuming 2,000 calories a day. About 400 should come from protein. So if you look at this example, 2 eggs and 1 fillet of wild fish is about 40 to 50 grams. But remember, a lot of the foods that have fat in them also have protein. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed. At the end, I'm going to show you what a plate looks like. I do want to share this. There's a lot of controversy around eating meat and cancer, and please know that there's also a lot of agenda around that. Our kids, our growing kids, definitely need meat and while they're fighting cancer. Now, there's a time and a place where we might have to limit it. And that's kind of based on blood work and knowing a little bit more about their nutrigenomics and things. But generally, most of my kids, I have them eating meat. But there is a big difference between conventional meat and organic meat. And then there's also a big difference in how you prepare it. So if you're barbecuing every day, that's not ideal. In order to preserve the nutrients in meat and to not make it carcinogenic, cancer causing, you ideally want to cook it under like 300 degrees is going to be under 300 is going to be better because cooking it really high on an open flame is a problem. Now, doing it once in a while, you guys, seriously, we barbecue, not an issue. But if you're kind of the family that like we just barbecue every night because it's easier, I would challenge you to consider slow cooking methods. So crock pot, steaming, poaching, braising, and slow roasting, really helpful. And you should enjoy your red meat rare. Not ground beef, of course, but steaks. And when you're searing the steak, you're killing off any bacteria that could be present. And if you're eating good quality meat, this is where most of the nutrients are bioavailable. So my favorite proteins, some of them match the favorite fats. So again, you're getting a lot of these same nutrients, and that's what's beautiful about animal fats and animal proteins. It's bioavailable, and you're usually getting protein and fat from one item. Okay, carbohydrates. So most of your carbohydrates are going to come from organic, fresh vegetables, raw fruit, and minimally properly prepared grains. Okay, but ideally we want to minimize that while we're going through treatment. Carbohydrates are important. They provide quick fuel for the brain. It's a quick source of energy. It helps regulate protein and fat digestion. It helps with elimination because of the fiber. And the right kind of carbs provide fiber to help with regular elimination. And we want our kids, they should be pooping every single day. If they're not pooping, that is the first thing I have to address. That is a huge problem, pooping every single day, especially when they're going through treatment. And so fiber helps with that process. But not all carbohydrates are created equal. And so that's important to understand. These vegetables you see here, that's very low in sugar, glucose. Bread, that's also a carbohydrate. It's really high in sugar, aka glucose. So very different. You're getting antioxidants and phytonutrients from the vegetables. You're not getting any benefit from the bread. In fact, I tell my clients if you're going through treatment, you absolutely should avoid gluten. There's a lot of reasons for that, one of them being zonulin. I won't get into that now, but gluten is something you want to avoid. Glucose and cancer. So all forms of carbohydrates and sugar are metabolized as glucose. Glucose isn't the enemy. Understand that. But we need to minimize it when we're walking through treatment. The primary fuel for cancer cells is sugar. Glucose is necessary. The brain needs it. Remember, we need it for energy, but we have to minimize it. I have so much hate when I post about sugar having an impact on a cancer diagnosis. You couldn't even imagine the people that come out of the woodworks to try to argue. And it's easy to kind of shut them up by just asking them if they know what a PET scan is. Because a PET scan is literally the way we detect cancer. And what is it? They take radioactive glucose. So basically, they turn the glucose into fluorescent so it glows in the dark. They inject it into your body, and they do this because you will light up like a Christmas tree where you have cancer. Why is that? Because they know that cancer cells uptake glucose 80% faster than a healthy cell. So they're using it as the Trojan horse. So yes, cancer is affected by glucose, by sugar. They literally use it to find it. So please understand the importance of cutting sugar out. And I don't mean just sugar. I mean chips and crackers and breads and pastas and things that are metabolized as sugar in the body. So again, when we look at what are the recommendations of carbohydrates, We have fresh organic veggies, fermented vegetables, minimal fruit, minimal raw honey and maple syrup, or pure stevia. And we're avoiding everything under the bad category. And hear me out, you guys. We're coming up on the holidays. Make sure you check out my website and social media. I share all kinds of healthy ways for your kids to still enjoy the holidays because I am a big believer in that. We're not locking them in a prison and telling them no to everything. There's ways to do it gently and safely and effectively. So when we talk about carbohydrates there, this is just such a minimal amount. They don't need a lot. They really don't. My favorite source of carbohydrates we're going to talk about in a minute, and that's fermented vegetables. So really to truly overcome cancer, it's the terrain, not the tumor we must target. And I want you to understand that. And this would replace cancer with any disease. To truly overcome disease, it's the terrain, meaning your body, that we have to target, not just the tumor. Why did why did the cancer process turn on in the beginning? You weren't deficient in chemotherapy and radiation for your child because the terrain, something went awry in the terrain. So here's some other foods that I want you to be mindful of incorporating. And I'll kind of skip through this because I want to make sure we have time for questions. I'll go through it quickly, but folate, I already mentioned, right? Folate is essential, and most people that I work with have an MTHFR mutation, heterozygous, homozygous, sometimes there's multiple, but we know that folate can help people properly detox when they need help breaking down, absorbing, and detoxing different things. So here's some great folate-rich foods. Spinach, again, is great. You can literally hide it, you guys, in so many things. Endive, bok choy, romaine. If your kids like Caesar salad, there you go. Make them Caesar salad every day if they like that. Asparagus, mustard greens. Again, goose and duck liver, we can get that in a capsule. In bovine organ meats are even better. But this is just giving you an example. Antioxidants. So when we're going through treatment, if we know when I'm working with a child in active treatment, I do not give them antioxidant supplements because chemo is pro-oxidant. We don't want to interfere with the benefit of chemo. I do believe chemo plays a role in treatment, and so does radiation and surgery. We don't want to lessen the effects of that, so we're never supplementing with antioxidants, but we are getting them in our diet because the beautiful thing about how God created your children is its ability to modulate. So your body knows what to use and how to use it when it's fed in its most whole absorbable form. So we can eat antioxidant foods. We just don't supplement with them. Supplementing is usually coming in a synthetic form or in a high dose. That's what we want to avoid. But we need these to help the body, to help the terrain heal and help fight cancer. So a couple antioxidants that you know of is quercetin and resveratrol. And again, we're not supplementing with these, we're getting them from foods. And so a lot of the sources of these are found in berries. They're found in green apples. Okay, so for quercetin, wine for, for us adults, not the kids, and onions, capers. So again, that Caesar salad, throw a couple capers on there. And then black currants, elderberry, these are all great sources in a food of quercetin. And then resveratrol, also wine, parents, moms. Um, and then we are looking at finding these in organic grapes. So if your children like grapes, and specific tea, you can find it. So again, these are things you can incorporate and enjoy giving to your children. And I always say, when you're feeding your children, feed them with intention, meaning tell them why. We use the word good guys and bad guys all the time when Kicker was going through treatment because he was little. I would say, buddy, this is going to help get rid of all those bad guys and it's going to make the good guys so much stronger. And he understood that. And he would say, even years later, like, is this good for the good guys or the bad guys? And so teach your kids why you're giving them things, and it gives them a little bit of power back too. Cruciferous vegetables. These are awesome. They're anti-cancer. This is just a lot of information about why and where those treatments are or where the studies are. But my favorite salad, I've shared this before, most kids like it, is arugula, Parmesan, olive oil, and a little bit of fresh lemon. It's delicious. And arugula is a bitter green and it's cruciferous. So now you have two anti-cancer things that are really helping. But look at this list. This is all cruciferous veggies. Choose one to introduce to your kids this week if they haven't tried it. Fermented foods. There is so many powerful nutrients present in fermented foods, and they're really easy to digest, more so than cooked or raw veggies. Fermented is incredible for guts that are just a mess from treatment. It's great for immune system. It helps with allergies. Like these are awesome. So some of our favorites are sauerkraut, pickles. Tempeh is technically fermented natto, which is an Asian type of ferment. Kefir, yogurt, kombucha, raw apple cider vinegar. What I tell people is like, what is your kid's favorite vegetable? Do they like carrots? Do they like asparagus? Pickle it. And it's easy to find a recipe on how to do that. You only need water and salt. You don't use vinegar or sugar to pickle. That's not the right way. But you can look it up. It could be a fun project with your child. Ferment their favorite vegetable and introduce that to them. But most kids like pickles. So, and then anti-inflammatory herbs. These are things that you can introduce into your cooking dishes. So black cumin seed oil. If any of you have received one of our Kit Cancer kits through our nonprofit, Kit Cancer, we send out a kit to every child that's been newly diagnosed. And in that kit, we have a company called Pure Indian Foods that puts in their black cumin seed oil for your kiddos. And you can add it. I have parents tell me all the time, like, I couldn't believe we added it to their dinner and they had no idea. Coriander, cumin, and tacos, great. Turmeric. A lot of these you can add to taco bowls or to burgers and they won't really notice. Curcumin, of course, many of you have heard of that, right? We don't supplement with this, but we'll generally incorporate it into meals. Let's see here. Ginger is awesome. It's a great anti-inflammatory and it also helps with nausea. And I'm really jumping through here, but you'll see a lot of information about the COX-2 and NFB, which are really helpful in stopping the cancering process. Pickled ginger. My daughter loves pickled ginger at sushi. Most of it is like not the best source, but if your child likes pickled things, try to pickle ginger or give them kimchi. It's awesome. Boswellia, this is frankincense. So if you have frankincense essential oil, it's a great thing to incorporate daily topically on your children on the bottoms of their feet. There's a lot of studies around Boswellia, the herb, and frankincense, the oil. And again, using the oil, just putting it under their tongue doesn't taste awesome, but using it on the bottoms of their feet, or you can just sneak it into salad dressing. But be careful because it is a pretty powerful smelling one. So start with one meal. You guys, I blew through that. I know that was a lot of information. They are recording this, so you'll get to go back and watch the replay. But I think it's important that you take a moment, everybody, take a deep breath, okay? You're not going to do all of this tomorrow. You're not going to do all of this next week. This is going to take time. And you are going to start with one meal. One meal. So maybe tomorrow you start with lunch. Maybe you start with breakfast. And I want you to incorporate one thing you learned tonight into one meal tomorrow. And then that will compound as you incorporate one more thing and then one more thing. And you'll find yourself 6 months from now and so proud of how much progress you and your child have made in incorporating these intentional meals. So I want to give you an example of a day in this is literally a day in our life. Okay. Now, tonight, my kids are at youth group. And you know what they're serving? Panda Express. So I'm telling you, like, we are not perfect. We are probably 90-10 as far as like how we eat, but my kids are 16 and almost 15. And I know that at youth group tonight, they're going to eat Panda Express. Actually, I will tell you, my son came in and he's like, Mom, you're not making me dinner. I have a dinner meeting right after this. And I said, no, bud. I said, don't you have youth group? And he was like, yeah, but they're serving Panda Express. I'm not going to eat that. I was like, oh, really? Since when? Okay. I'm proud of you. He's pretty healthy. He actually usually will turn things down where my daughter is like, I'll eat your Panda Express and my Panda Express. But I just say that because while this is a typical day in our life, we're not perfect. And I don't want you to compare your starting point to my 15-year journey. Okay. So I wanted to just give you a visual of what a beautiful way to incorporate all of those things that we talked about in a day. Eggs, maybe you don't like them poached, maybe you like them scrambled, maybe you want to add a little cheese because that's how your kids will eat it. Great. Broccoli microgreens. avocado with some sea salt, a little bit of sauerkraut. Maybe your kids hate sauerkraut. Give them a pickle at breakfast. That's totally fine and actually really healthy. For lunch, if they'll do bone broth, amazing. You can add butter to it. You can add herbs to it, more salt to it. Cocoa is a great yogurt. It's flavored. You can get it plain. Most kids don't like the plain, and you can add fresh berries. If you need to add a drizzle of raw honey to it to get them to eat it, that's okay too. And then dinner, we're always having a piece of meat that's pretty rare, unless it's ground beef. Obviously, you're cooking that through. We love butternut or kombucha squash, especially this time of year. And then we'll do that arugula salad I mentioned or something fermented as a vegetable. This is kind of a like, basic, maybe more bland for your children, but this was just an example of the things that you can incorporate. They're not going to probably do bone broth and yogurt at lunch. Maybe you choose one or the other. The idea is start with one meal and incorporate something that you learned tomorrow. So looking at this last piece, I want you to kind of consider, does this plate have a source of healthy fat? Does it have a source of carbohydrates coming from vegetables or fermented food? Does it have protein? Does it have cruciferous vegetables? What about antioxidants? Or what about any anti-inflammatory herbs? Right? So thinking of those things, and you can take a screenshot of this, and then tomorrow you're going to choose one thing to add in. Maybe it's the fat. Maybe it's the herb. You want to play around with an herb. And this is just going to help tremendously with your kids' healing. So questions, I see some in the chat here. Kids calling they are hungry. Going to make grass-fed beef stir fry with carrots, peppers, onions, and garlics. I love garlic. I love it. That's awesome. Good for you, Megan. I'm hungry. Actually, after talking about that, I'm hungry. Should you avoid all fruits? No, I don't think you need to avoid all fruits. Now, again, remember, like, each individual is specific. And so if I'm working with a child, most of my kiddos, we have to bribe. I'm not above bribery, so we'll bribe them with, trying to get them to be bribed with fruit or homemade gummies that come from organic fruit juice. So no, you don't have to avoid all fruit. Now, if it's an adult I'm working with and they have a tumor and we're trying to get them into ketosis, then generally we won't do a lot of fruit. But with kids, we want them to be eating and we want them to still enjoy it. So we'll just make sure that we're not overdoing the fruit, and that we're serving it with fat. So fruit with some homemade, coconut milk whipped cream with a dash of like a little bit of raw honey in it is a great way to get fat into them and some fiber. They're going to be sending out, Brad and Beth are going to be emailing out the recording. So you guys usually do that within a couple days of the class. So you guys should receive that. Any other questions? Should everyone be organic? That's a great question. Yeah, here's the thing, like done is better than none. Do the best you can with what you have. There's a really cool thing you can find at ewg.org, ewg.org, and that for vegetables and fruit, it'll show you the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. So that will show you if the clean 15 means these are the 15 foods that are generally going to be okay if you don't buy them organic. The dirty dozen, you always want to buy organic. But here's what I tell people when they ask a question like that. Have you ever seen what the people that spray food with pesticides, have you seen what they wear? Because it's terrifying. And if they're wearing that because they have to protect themselves against the toxin they're spraying the food with or the hay that your cows are eating, I don't want that anywhere near me. So we are about 98% organic. Now, when we go out to eat, that's a different story, right? But yes, 100% I agree with eating organic and doing the best you can with what you have. And also most kids, when I do a toxin test on them, when we're working together, glyphosate is through the roof. Glyphosate literally causes cancer. Glyphosate is found in Roundup, and in pesticides, basically. So yeah, our kiddos going through treatment need to avoid glyphosate and most pesticides. Um, yeah, so animal protein can create glucose. It's through oh my gosh, I always forget this big word. It's been a long day. But yes, there is a process that your body converts the glucose from protein or converts protein into glucose. So is there a glucose monitor for an adult on a carnivore diet? Yeah, I really like the Keto Mojo. I use that. I enjoy using it. It's kind of fun. It's helpful information. I wouldn't use it with kids. It's another poke, and we don't need to give our kids more pokes for their nervous system. But Keto Mojo is really great. And it'll show you your ketones, it'll show you your glucose. Super helpful. Yeah. When is the latest time to eat? What is the latest time to eat fruits? Um, I would say, I don't know if you're talking about at nighttime. Like I try to make sure, people are done eating by 6 p.m. and not having anything after, and then restarting breakfast in the morning. I wouldn't let fruit be the last thing you eat just because it can spike blood sugar, and we don't want blood sugar spiked ever when going to bed, but especially in a cancering process. So I would eat your fruit as a midday snack, would probably be ideal. Um, and then, yeah, don't let like anything sweet be the last thing you eat before bed. How can we avoid buying fresh herbs sprayed with buying fresh herbs that aren't sprayed? Usually you can buy the plant. Like I know Trader Joe's sells like plants of herbs, so you can usually find organic plants. Herbs are also, I say this as a total, I always tell my clients, I will never tell you to do something that I don't do or that I haven't done. I never will. In fact, you'll catch me doing crazy things because I'm like I did colon hydrotherapy a couple months ago because I was going to tell one of my clients to do it. And I'm like, I've never done this. I need to do it myself so I can be able to tell them, I've done it. But so I'm telling you this, even though I'm not doing it, herbs are really easy to grow. Am I growing them right now? No. But they are very easy to grow. I've grown them before and it's cheap and easy and you can have your kids be involved and like plant whatever your favorite herbs are because you can plant them in a wine barrel in a pot, put it on your front doorstep or on your porch and it's pretty cool. Um, are you supplementing with vitamin D and K if it's low? Absolutely. Yes. Yes, you should be supplementing with vitamin D3, K2. If it's low and if your child's going through treatment, you need to be begging the doctor to check their vitamin D levels because there is plenty of evidence and studies that have shown lower vitamin D levels equal lower, um, better outcomes with treatment. So we want vitamin D minimum 80, preferably 100. Does diet play a role in hormone production? 100%. Yep, absolutely. Sugar, sugar is like your hormone's greatest enemy. Fat is your hormone's best friend. So a lot of this information would apply to your hormones as well. In Canada, it's hard to find anything raw. So there's another, yeah, if you can't find raw, just stick with cultured dairy. So stick with yogurts, cultured cheese, organic, of course. And I would do, if you're not going to, I don't think you need to drink milk in general. If you're not drinking raw, I would just kind of move that out of your diet, but you could, make different milks. If you can get goat, like a good low pasteurized goat milk, that might be a better option, but usually that doesn't taste as good. So I would just, not drink milk if you can't get it raw. What tests you do for MTHFR? So there are some like simple blood tests you can do, but the test that I order for my clients is called 3X4. It's $299. Anybody can go on their website and order it. You just need somebody to help you understand it. It's kind of like a Greek, it's trying to learn a new language. But it's called 3X4, I think .com. And it not doesn't just show you MTHFR, it shows you all the genetic SNPs. It shows you where you really need to pay attention to. I reference that report for my kids all the time. It's so helpful. Um, Jovial grain-free pasta is best. Well, yes, unless your child's going through treatment. We really want to avoid any grains while going through treatment. Um, if your child's not going through treatment or it's a very special treat once in a while, then yes, I do like the Jovial because it's organic and it is rice. It's not gluten. Uh, but if they're going through treatment, I wouldn't do any grains. I would do like zoodles from zucchini. And I know that's tricky, but it's just a matter of kind of shifting their taste and preferences. After treatment, yeah, it's a matter like, listen, I always say this, and I don't say this to alarm people, but once you go through treatment and you finish treatment, that's where the real deep healing needs to begin. Because we know after treatment, it's just wrecked their body. And it's, we know that recurrence is a possibility. And once this is, our life is forever changed after navigating a cancer diagnosis. And so what I always say is, sure, we have a little bit more room, right, when they're done with treatment, but I would definitely still be mindful and just being really mindful about what they're eating and like this changed our whole life and how we will forever live. Is my son on as many supplements right now as he was when he was going through treatment? No. Do I let him have more treats now than he did through treatment? Sure. But we're just still really intentional with how he eats and what he eats and where he's getting those nutrients. Yeah, Jackie, a lot of times it's because of his genetics. If his vitamin D level doesn't come up, a lot of times that's a genetic SNP, and it also could be he needs the cofactors. So it depends on the child, but vitamin D works synergistically with other nutrients. So sometimes they need a little bit of zinc. Sometimes they need more fat. Maybe they need help with fat digestion because remember, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So maybe he's getting enough fat, but he's not digesting it well. There could be a couple of reasons for that, and why it's not coming up, but that's important to get up. Yeah, I'll put my link in here. I have a supplement shop on Fullscript. So you can go to that here. And when you go to that link, you'll see my favorites section. And it has some of my favorite supplement brands. You can also find anything in there, even if it's not in my favorites. But I will tell you, my couple of my favorite vitamin Ds is Da Vinci D3, K2, or I really like if your child is chronically low vitamin D, Bioprotein Tech D3, K2. And you can find those supplements in the Fullscript shop. So D3K2 or the Bioprotein Tech if they have, or the Da Vinci, if they're usually around like 70, that one would be fine. But if they're low, under 70, I would put them on the Bioprotein Tech, and they're both drops, and just follow the dosing on the bottle. It was like rapid fire. Well, thank you guys. Of course, Brad and Beth, thanks for welcoming me into the community, and thank you guys all for being on. I appreciate your time tonight.
Yes, thank you, Susan. It was very educational. I know we learned a lot, so I hope everyone else did too. And we will, yes, the recording will be going out. Our assistant normally is really good about that in the next day or two to get that out to people who have registered. So if there's no more further questions, we'll let Susan go, and so she can not be late for her dinner date.
Well, thank you guys. And we're planning, we were talking right before this about next year's schedule and what that will look like. And so feel free to write back to the email any topics that you want to, learn about. We're happy to listen to that. So yeah, we'd love to support you, and we'll continue doing these next year. And I hope all of you have a beautiful Thanksgiving as well.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone. Thank you
Bye,
for
you
joining.
guys.